So do you have some starter sit decisions you need to know for week 1? Well, let's try and address most of those right here. These are the top 24 running backs ranked and tiered for week 1. And it begins with my number 1 running back for the entire week. That's Bijan Robinson. I have him projected in the fantasy blueprint for 18.5 points. Now, Bijan will take on the Panthers week 1, and he's going to be a 3.5 point favorite. Now, last year, the Falcons running backs, when they were 3.5 point favorites, they averaged 15.8 points, which is a top 8 weekly finish. And these Atlanta running backs last year were far less talented or dangerous than Bijan Robinson's gonna be. So Bijan will face the Panthers defensive line, which overall was an average unit last year, but they were the 3rd best team, as you can see right here in football, at stopping the run. But they were kind of a hot and cold defense. I mean, Tyler Algier last year for this Falcons team in his first game against the Panthers put up 17.5 points. Now, the number 2 running back for week 1 is Christian McCaffrey, who finds himself this week against the Steelers as a 2.5 point favorite. Now, McCaffrey was a favorite last year in 9 games with the 49ers, and in these 9 games, he averaged 21.1 points, and between his receptions and rush attempts, he had over 19 per game. Now, this week, he will indeed face the Steelers' top 5 stout defensive line. But the one area where this defense struggles is their linebackers. They rank 24th in the NFL to start the season, which favors McCaffrey's skill set of receiving. This fella had all of the running back receiving game usage last year on elite levels, a 22% target share, number 1. He ran the 3rd most routes despite missing some time and being limited in some games. And then his route participation, he was running a route on 75% of his team's dropbacks. He is literally his team's wide receiver 1 and running back 1. Now, the next man up, and I believe the final man in tier 1 for us for week 1, is going to be Austin Eckler, who he's going to get a matchup against the Dolphins. And this isn't just an average game environment for Eckler, no. He's a 3-point favorite with a 51-point game total. Only the opening game between the Lions and Chiefs has a higher total than this one. And this is really important because high totals generally mean a faster pace of play, meaning more plays, which is great for fantasy. And Eckler played in 5 games last year with a 50-plus point total. And in these contests, he averaged 21.7 fantasy points on 21 touches. And this dude's a nut because he had over 7 targets per game in those contests, literally like wide receiver 1 numbers. And as you can see here, only the Chiefs have a higher team total this week. The Chargers projected to score 27 points. Again, it helps that he's a 3-point favorite, and he gets Rashawn Slater, his stud left tackle, back. Now, to start off tier 2, we get our number 4 running back on the week. It's Tony Pollard, who will take on his division rival, the Giants, on Sunday Night Football in prime time. Now, this is going to be a very nice matchup against the Giants linebackers, who, according to Pro Football Focus, are a borderline bottom 10 unit in the league, and last season they had a bottom 3 run defense. The Cowboys are 3-point favorites, and in 11 games last year as a favorite, Pollard averaged 17.5 fantasy points, and between his receptions and rush attempts, he had 16 overall opportunities, which, again, this is counting Zeke being there. Now Zeke's gone. And hey, if you're enjoying this content, make sure to hit the subscribe button. It'll allow you to see all my future content that's releasing. The number 5 running back this week is Derrick Henry, who finds himself in a pretty tough matchup against the Saints linebackers. See, entering this season, their linebackers are going to be a top 5 overall unit led by Demario Davis, but their defensive line in front of those linebackers is pretty shaky. There are some names here. You have Graterson, who broke out last year, and obviously Cameron Jordan is a name that's been in New Orleans for a while now, but outside of that, there's not a lot here in terms of the run defense as well. And if you look back at Derrick Henry the last 4 seasons, these are just his rush attempts, but if you were to factor in his receiving usage as well, this guy is averaging 24 touches per game, not opportunities, touches per game since 2019. No matter how hard your matchup is, when that's your average volume, you're going to be fantasy relevant. Now, the Titans are 3-point underdogs in this game, but the game script for Henry doesn't really matter. They run him either way. Henry was an underdog 8 times last year and still averaged 19 points on 20 touches. The number 6 running back is Saquon Barkley, and he'll be on the opposite side of this matchup from Tony Pollard against the Cowboys on Sunday Night Football with a nice game total of 46 points. Now, Saquon thrived in his first year with Brian Daboll as head coach. His receiving game usage hit career highs, a 17% target share. His route participation, 3rd in the NFL amongst running backs, running a route on 60% of Daniel Jones' dropbacks. And he also saw a career high in overall touches, which bodes well now entering year 2. Now, in this matchup, it'll be a fine matchup against the Cowboys defensive line. Like, Van Der Esch is the only main name on that D-line. Now, the Giants are 3-point underdogs in this one, but Saquon last year actually performed better as an underdog. He averaged 18.9 points compared to 15.3, and a lot of it had to do with this. His receiving usage basically doubled, 4.2 receptions compared to just 2.2 receptions. So expect Saquon to see 80% or more of the snaps, which is elite usage for an RB. The number 7 running back for week 1 is going to be Josh Jacobs, who the saga is over for this guy. He is about to play week 1 and will take the field against a division rival, the Denver Broncos. Now, the Broncos defensive line, they kind of revamped it this offseason. They brought in Zach Allen. That's a good get. They got Frank Clark, but this is still a unit that overall, even bringing in those guys, there's question marks of how they'll gel, but outside of that, this is not the same Broncos defensive line from 5+ years ago. And Jacobs is coming off of a season where he saw 24 opportunities per game, and he remains in a contract year, so his motivation should still be high. And last season, in his 2 games against Denver, Jacobs averaged 30 touches, touches, 168 total yards, and 27 fantasy points. Now, of course, this is a different team entering this year for Jacobs. He has a new quarterback, some different coaching changes, and in this game, the Raiders are 4.5-point underdogs, which typically isn't good news for a running back, but in 4 similar situations last year as about a 3-point underdog or more, he averaged 21.9 fantasy points, and between his receptions and rush attempts, he had nearly 25 total touches. So he's a game flow independent back, meaning no matter if they're down big, he's still going to be putting up points. If they're up big, he's going to get even more touches. Now, our number 8 running back, it's going to be our final RB in tier 2, and it's Nick Chubb. He's going to open the year, and he has, look, a strong Bengals front 7 he's going to have to face. But Chubb's not going to have anybody stealing his touches. So even though it's a tougher matchup and he's a 2.5-point underdog, he should be seeing an 80% plus opportunity share. Because as Alex Caruso points out here, the Broncos only kept 3 running backs. They just traded for Pierre Strong, so he doesn't really know the system much. Nick Chubb, and then Jerome Ford, who is still battling a hamstring injury and might not even play week 1. And even though he's an underdog, the Browns still have a nice team total this week. So being an underdog with a nice team total of 22.75 points, let's call it 23 points, that usually bodes well for fantasy production. It means you're going to have a high scoring game. Chubb played in 5 similar situations last year as a slight underdog with a nice team total, and he averaged 16.3 fantasy points on 18 opportunities per game. And now Kareem Hunt is gone, and Chubb still remains behind this top 5 offensive line. Now to kick off tier 3, we have a number 9 RB, and yes, Alexander Mattison is a top 10 running back this week because he's going to project for 15 to 20 touches against the Bucks bottom 10 defensive line. And yeah, you might not think this is that bad of a D line compared to a couple years ago, but it is. Now they still have guys like Vita Vea, you can see here, and Shaq Barrett on this defensive line, but they're coming off of bad seasons. These are guys who are only getting older at this point, and this defensive line is falling pretty quickly. Now you get Mattison as a 6-point favorite, and the Vikings have the 4th highest team total, nearly 26 points this week. Now last year, Dalvin Cook in this offense is the lead back, played in 10 games as a 3-point favorite or better, and he averaged 20 opportunities and 17 fantasy points. Now like we talked about heading into the season, Mattison has been bad the last few years, not that efficient, and was dead last in explosiveness last year. I've said how much of a fan I was of Ty Chandler as a late round running back in your redraft leagues, but again, this is week 1. He's not going to be taking over the backfield all right away in week 1. This is still Madison's backfield to start the year. He was rested in the preseason. He was paid this offseason. So week 1, he's going to be the guy as a 6-point favorite with a nice matchup and team total. He's a top 10 back. Now to round out the top 10 running backs, we have Travis Etienne, who again, like Mattison, we have to shift our preseason expectations entering week 1 because for season-long leagues, yes, there are some concerns. And we've well documented those concerns with Tank Bigsby being drafted, the preseason usage of Tank Bigsby, and it continuing to get better, but Bigsby's not going to take over this backfield like Ty Chandler and Madison all right away in week 1. This is still Etienne's backfield. And that's encouraging for week 1 because the Jaguars are tied for the 6th highest team total, around 25 points. Etienne comes in as a 4-point favorite, and he sets up nicely just in general in this top 5 potential Jags offense. He'll face the Colts, who have a league average defensive line led by DeForest Buckner. Now this is important because the Jaguars offensive line is a big concerning point. They have guys banged up in general. They're dropping after last year. They're going to be losing Jawan Taylor, and they replace him with a rookie, Antone Harrison. Luckily, they won't be overpowered by the Colts defensive line. This is a nice game environment for a lead back. He's projected for about 15 points in the blueprint. Now, number 11 running back is going to be Ramondre Steven. He's a sneaky stud for this week, but he gets the Eagles in week 1, which might be his toughest matchup of the year. Maybe you get a buy low situation after this week. The Eagles, quite literally, once again, are going to be projected by PFF to have the number 1 defensive line this year, despite losing Javon Hargrave this offseason. They're going to replace him with 2nd-year stud out of Georgia, Jalen Carter. Now, one area where Stevenson in this run game can find success is the linebacking core. The Eagles had great linebackers last year, but they lost both of their starting linebackers in free agency. They couldn't re-sign, and they couldn't get everybody after a Super Bowl run year. TJ Edmonds and Kaiser White are now gone, leaving a lot of question marks in this Eagles linebacking core, which is the 2nd level to where Ramondre Stevenson will be running. Now, the Patriots are 4.5-point underdogs in this game, but this actually bodes well for Stevenson, who was 3rd in running back targets last year. And in 9 games as an underdog last year, you can see right here, he averaged 16 fantasy points compared to being a favorite where he was seeing less than 14 per game. And now we go to our number 12 running back, and it is going to be Joe Mixon. He was a top 10 running back for us on the entire season, and week 1, he's in a nice spot. Because as you can see right here, the Bengals are tied for the 6th highest team total on the week against the Browns with 25 points, and in similar matchups last year, Mixon averaged 14 fantasy points on 20 opportunities per game. And the fella's going to set up with no competition week 1 after Samaje Perine is gone. Nobody really stood out. Travion Williams has been battling injury. Apparently, Chris Evans is the number 2 back over 5th-round rookie Chase Brown, but if we don't even know who the number 2 back is at this point, then there's really no threat. Now, Mixon's not going to have an easy matchup against the Browns' top 5 defensive line. Yeah, they lost Jadeveon Clowney this offseason, but they brought in a couple of key pieces. And those pieces are Zadarius Smith and Dalvin Tomlinson. But Mixon will still command the red zone work, and last year he set career highs in receiving usage, 5th in receptions, 6th in receiving yards, and now Samaje Perine is gone, leaving behind 51 running back targets It also helps that Joe Burrow has been held out of camp in the preseason with injuries, so maybe he's not fully back 100% to be mobile, meaning he'll have to lean on Mixon and checkdowns more. So Mixon's our running back 12, and now this next asset is something you want. And it's something thousands of you are already using. It's the Fantasy Blueprint, because if you want to win your league every single week of the year, smack around your buddies, this is for you. It's going to have all the tools and analysis you need to do just that. You get the weekly rankings, there'll be projections, rest of season rankings, waiver wire help, a lot of things. Now the Blueprint is easy to get. You just scan the QR code on the screen or click the link in the description below and follow the 2 quick and simple steps. So here are those 2 simple steps that you'll see when you click the link or scan the QR code. But check this out. If you don't make your fantasy playoffs, I'll just refund the $5 that it is for the entire year, by the way. So it's like, I don't know, a quarter a week to be getting access to the Fantasy Blueprint. And if you don't make your playoffs, 100% refund. So to join the thousands of people already using the Blueprint this year to beat their buddies and have an inside edge, scan the QR code on the screen or click the link in the description below. The number 13 running back is Jahmyr Gibbs. This elite pass catching running back is in the most ideal situation to start his career. He opens up the season against the Kansas City Chiefs in the best game environment. Yes, he's a 6.5 point underdog, but that bodes well for his skill set and earning targets. And it's a 54-point game total, the best environment of the week. Despite being a big underdog, his team in the Lions is still projected to score 23.5 points. So this means you're going to see a lot of points in general in this game, a lot of targets, probably fast pace of play. That bodes well for the pass catching RB. DeAndre Swift was an underdog 10 times in this offense last season. And in these games, he averaged 13.2 fantasy points. And by all accounts, Gibbs is a better pass catcher, a faster player, and a better player in general because he was taken in the first round with a top 12 pick. And if you need even more reasons why, obviously you're starting Gibbs week 1, but to get excited, whether you want to play him in DFS or just bet on him in player props, well, look at this. He's running behind a top 5 offensive line with a bunch of studs on it, from Jonah Jackson, Frank Ragnow, the best guy in this team, the younger player in Penei Sewell. This is the greatest offensive environment for a rookie to start his career. The number 14 running back is Aaron Jones, who, look, he's going to open up the season as a slight underdog against the division rival Bears, but this is actually the best offensive versus defensive line matchup of the week. You get the Packers, who are a borderline top 5 unit with Elkin Jenkins and David Bakhtiari returning from injury, going up against the Bears' number 31 ranked defensive line, who struggled to get any pressure, who struggled against the run last year, according to PFF, and they are going to yet again this year. And oh yeah, last season, Aaron Jones was still elite, tied with Nick Chubb, only behind Josh Jacobs as the number 2 graded running back in the league, was a top 5 pass protector, so he's always out there on third downs to potentially earn some more targets as well. Play Aaron Jones. And now we kick off tier 4 of the running backs with Kenneth Walker, who, yes, he's expected to play week 1, even though he's a little bit banged up. And in this matchup, it's a nice spot. And a nice spot might be underselling it. He's a 4.5 point favorite with a nice overall game total and team total against the Rams, who defensive line stinks. Yes, Aaron Donald is there. We all know Aaron Donald is great, but outside of that, there's no one. And even worse is their linebacker core is expected to be the dead last ranked unit in the league. And this is shocking because last year they had the best player in the league when it comes to linebackers, and that was Bobby Wagner, ranked number 1 overall, number 2 against the run. Well, now he's gone. Now Walker does indeed have competition in the second round rookie Zach Charbonnet, who I think is actually starter worthy as well in this matchup right now, especially if Walker's not 100%. There's a big question on who will earn the red zone work, and we're going to find that out. But for week 1, you should still see 15 plus touches in a nice environment for Walker. And as a starter last season, Walker averaged 16 fantasy points. Now the number 16 back is J.K. Dobbins, who sets up nicely in general in 2023. He's now healthy behind a top 5 offensive line led by an elite tackle in Ronnie Stanley. Now Dobbins looks to pick up where he left off last year. When he was healthy, he was a top 15 back and number 2 in broken tackles. And the fella is now the biggest favorite of the week, so maybe the best game environment. He's basically a 10-point favorite against the Houston Texans, as you can see right here, with a 27-point team total, the 3rd best on the week. So arguably no running back is in a better situation, and Dobbins has actually played 5 games in his career as a 10-point favorite, and in these contests he averaged 13.6 fantasy points. Now that's right in line where the Blueprint has him projected for this week at 13.5 points. The RB17 this week in tier 4 is going to be Cam Akers, who's looking also to pick up where he left off last year, where over the final 6 weeks he was a top 5 back. And now Akers is going to get his starting quarterback Stafford back and healthy, which should lead to a more efficient offense and more red zone drive. He'll have a beneficial matchup against the Seahawks, who rank 30th entering the year in their overall defensive line standing, which is nice because Akers is going to be behind not the greatest offensive line, so they're going to need all the help they can get. Now Akers is in line to see like 80% of the snaps, which is elite. Only 2 running backs in Alvin Kamara and Saquon Barkley did that last year. The only guy who could steal touches is Kyren Williams, who was rested in the preseason and might earn some third down work, but emphasis on might. Now Akers is an underdog this week, but even last year as an underdog, in 6 games he averaged 18 points on 19 opportunities. Now the number 18 running back is a fun one and might seem a little bit random to you, but yeah, he's top 20 this week. Jamal Williams. Look, Alvin Kamara is suspended. It's going to be the starting for the year in Jamal Williams based on all the camp and preseason usage, even though the rookie Kendre Miller 3rd round pick will be involved. And we said it most of this preseason, Jamal Williams was not efficient last year, just 54th on the ground, 50th overall in his yards per touch, but he did see 45 carries inside the 10-yard line. So when you can't get more than 10 yards on those carries, yes, of course you're going to be seeing less yards per carry, so that'll get skewed skewed down a little. Williams is still a solid pass protector, which should keep him out there often over the rookie, and he hasn't fumbled really ever. And the number 19 running back is Miles Sanders, he's been batting a groin injury in camp, but he is adamant that he will play week 1. And look, this is honestly a brutal environment for Sanders because the Panthers have the 3rd worst team total on the week. In Bryce Young's first game, the rookie, things could definitely go wrong here. They're only projected for 18 total points. Now, the benefit for Sanders is that he'll get the Atlanta Falcons defensive line that ranks 27th to open the year. And they have a lot of names that you know, Grady Jarrett, Calais Campbell, but the problem here is that these dudes are really old, and outside of them, there's nobody young and up and coming in place. So if healthy, Sanders sets up to be a 3-down back with pass catching skill sets and the red zone usage. Now, there is a slight fear that Sanders won't see his normal usage because of this groin injury may be lingering, so he's only projected for 12.5 points, but still a top 20 back. Now, tier 5 opens up with Najee Harris, and this is potentially the worst spot of Najee Harris's career. Not only does he have Jaylen Warren breathing down his back from the preseason to steal touches and snaps, but now Najee is a 2.5 point home underdog against the 49ers number 2 ranked defensive line that adds Javon Hargrave. Even if Joey Bosa isn't there week 1 due to contract disputes, this is still an elite defensive line. And oh yeah, the 49ers probably have the best linebackers in the league with Fred Warner and Dre Greenlaw. So Najee hasn't been efficient his first 2 years of his career, now has his toughest matchup of probably his career. Now, it does help that the Steelers did improve the offensive line. They added a top 15 guard in free agency, Isaac Samalu, and a first-round rookie in Broderick Jones. So maybe this helps him a little bit. Maybe you're in a bind and you have to start him because you took him in like round 3 or 4 of your draft, but not a great spot. The number 21 running back is going to be Dameon Pierce, who we'll find out a lot about Pierce week 1 because he's in the worst in-game environment out of any running back. Even Najee Harris, we just talked about this week, because Pierce comes into this one with the 2nd lowest team total, just 17.2 points, and he's a 10-point underdog. You're probably gonna have to either see early success in a touchdown out of Pierce on the ground or finally see passing game usage that we didn't see last year, but we did see some glimpses of this preseason. Your concern would be that there's a new running back who was used more often in the passing game with the Bills and was more efficient there than Pierce was last season. You see him on 3rd downs that can crush Pierce's upside, so he might be in a situation this week where we either need to see that passing game usage or he has to score a touchdown. The blueprint currently has Pierce this week for 12.4 fantasy points. And the next man up is Brian Robinson, who I'm a fan of this week, our number 22 running back, because he's probably set up the best out of any Commanders back in week 1. Robinson is known as the better pure rusher compared to Antonio Gibson, and the Commanders are 7-point favorites this week with a very nice team total, which sets up perfectly. And the matchup against the Cardinals, it's as good as it gets because the Cardinals rank dead last in defensive line. They lost a bunch of guys this offseason, Marcus Golden, JJ Watt, and probably their biggest loss was Zach Allen. And now, as a favorite last season in 3 games, Brian Robinson averaged 12.6 fantasy points on 16 opportunities. Now, our number 23 running back is James Cook, who's going to get a Monday Night Football game in primetime against the Jets, who have an elite secondary, but outside of Quentin Williams, not much on the defensive line. And now the Bills are going to be in a nice spot. They're 3-point favorites with a 24.5 point team total, which is very respectable. And James Cook in the preseason saw 70% of the snaps, which only 6 running backs saw all last year. Now, running backs in Josh Allen's system, when they're 3-point favorites with at least a 24-point team total, they average over 12 fantasy points per game. And Cook is a more explosive and just better running back than guys like Devin Singletary and Zach Moss were in the past. Now, our number 24 running back is James Conner, who's a 7-point underdog. And normally that's a terrible thing, but it hasn't been for Conner, because in 12 games as an underdog last year, he averaged basically 16 fantasy points and about 18 total opportunities and touches between his receptions and rush attempts per game. Now, of course, there's going to be a new quarterback this year with Colt McCoy cut and Kyler Murray injured, so that's not good. And then there's a lot of other things that aren't good. His O-line ranks 31st according to PFF. The Cardinals have the lowest team total on the week, and his opponent has a top 5 defensive line. So yes, all of that is not great, which puts Conner projecting for only about 12 points in the blueprint, but a couple of receptions. Now, if you are curious who just missed the list and round out the top 30 running backs, as of right now, obviously we're going to get more news. I'm recording this before Monday of the first week of the season from practice reports. It's Isaiah Pacheco, David Montgomery, Dalvin Cook, Breece Hall, the running backs for the Jets, splitting it up. Rashad White, and then Samaje Perine is the 30th overall back. So these are the top 24 running backs, or top 30 after you just saw those guys for week 1. Now, if you want to see which one of these running backs and more players you need to trade for before week 1, because after their week 1 matchup you won't be able to get him, well, check out this video right here. And if you made it all the way to the end, hit the subscribe button. It greatly helps me out, helps the channel grow, but it'll allow you to see all my future content to smack around your buddies.